Hello and good evening. I'm Melissa Idris. Welcome to Consider This. This is the show where we want you to consider and then reconsider what you know of the news of the day. October 3rd marks German Unity Day, or Tag der Deutschen Einheit, the day that commemorates the German reunification in 1990. Now, 32 years later, we take stock of how far Germany has come and where it is today. So it's a pleasure to introduce my guest today, the Ambassador of Germany to Malaysia, His Excellency Dr. Peter Blomeyer. Welcome to the show, Mr. Ambassador. It's good of you to join me. Thank you for being here today. If I may begin our conversation today, maybe you can start by sharing, for those who may not be familiar, tell us a little bit more about the significance of German Unity Day.
Yes, thank you very much. Thank you for inviting me, and a very good evening to you. Yeah, the German people have been divided for 40 years into West Germany and East Germany, and West Germany had the privilege of living in a free democracy with the rule of law, enjoying human rights, and in a market economy, whilst the east of our country, East Germany, was under communist rule, one can say under communist dictatorship. And in 1989, there a political miracle happened. That is to say, the East Germans, they staged what we call a velvet revolution. It was a revolution without shedding blood. They were demonstrating peacefully. They were calling their rulers and told them who is the right and rightful sovereign of the country by the slogan, "We are the people." And then this slogan changed into "We are one people." We are one people, signifying that West Germany and East Germany belong together. It was the call for unity. And on November 9th, in 1989, the wall crumbled. That is to say, the people jumped onto the wall and danced on this wall. And it lasted only 1 year. Then Germany was reunited. That is to say, on the 3rd of October 1990, reunification was completed. And that was something which had repercussions all over the world. Also in other Eastern and Central European countries, courageous people shook off the yoke of communism. And then the iron wall between Eastern and Western Europe fell down. And these countries also could join NATO, could join EU. And this is the situation which we have until now. The message is that you cannot subdue for long or forever the call for freedom, but you also have to work for liberating yourself, and you have to work also to preserve liberty. Like in Russia, for instance, there was also an attempt to build a democratic society, but unfortunately it failed.
Okay, all right. So, so October 3rd, German Unity Day. You know, I'm trying to make the comparison. Where every year when Malaysia Day comes around, many of us we use it as an opportunity to take stock of how far we've come as a nation, and also how we're falling short in some respects. So we highlight the need to address some of the systemic inequalities and inequities that remain. Is it the same for Germany? Is this the time where you take stock of where you are? And if you were to do that, how would you describe it? How have you seen it change, particularly in the past few decades?
Yes, of course, Germany has changed. It had already changed before unification. And the two parts of Germany have developed differently, and afterwards it had then developed together. But of course, the starting point in 1990 was very different in East and West Germany, and it was a lot invested into East Germany to adapt the living conditions in the east of our countries to the West. And many things have been achieved, but I dare say that up to now, not completely. The living conditions are not yet completely the same in both parts of our country, but then we also have differences, for instance, between North and South. So we are still working on it, and I think it is work in progress.
Okay. Well, what about the Germany of today? Now, I understand that there's soaring inflation and energy costs, and then there's the prolonged tensions over the Ukraine war. Some commentators, Mr. Ambassador, have pointed out that this kind of combination has created an ideal atmosphere of resentment, of dissatisfaction. Would you say that is a fair assessment?
I don't think so. It is at least not my observation. I think the German people is very united. By the way, not only the German people, but the people in Europe, very united in the condemnation of the Russian war of aggression against Ukraine. And they have shown a great solidarity. One can say one thing what Mr. Putin has achieved positively is that unity within NATO and unity within the EU was never so strong as it is now. Of course, we all feel the impact of this war because Mr. Putin has triggered not one crisis but several crises. He has triggered an energy crisis, of course. He has triggered a food crisis, an environmental crisis, and an inflation crisis. And for energy, prices have soared, also for food, for commodities. Inflation is at a peak now. And of course, we all struggle to cope with that. And Russia was the biggest supplier of coal, gas, and oil for Germany. And all of a sudden, within the course of a few months, all this breaks away, and we are struggling to find new suppliers. But I think you should not underestimate the will of the German economy and the will of the German people to cope with that and to find new solutions. And I think if it comes to questions like coping with climate change, this will even boost the efforts to find new ways to decarbonization.
That's quite an interesting take. I was reading about the about Germany's energy saving rules that have recently come into force. Is that how the public is seeing it? That this could be a way to reduce energy consumption, but whether this is a good thing because winter is just around the corner.
Yes, well, it is a must to save energy and also to change the sources of energy. We need to change from fossil fuels to renewables. And we have a new government in power since last December. And one member of this government is the Green Party, our ecological party. And the whole government, also the other parties, have subscribed to this goal that we decarbonize and that we rebuild our economy according to the needs of the environment. So now this, what is happening now, on one side is it's pushing us back because if we do not have enough gas now, and because Russia has ceased to supply us with gas, but and now we have to go back to coal, which of course is a disadvantage. But on the other hand, the efforts to adopt new energy sources such as renewables, these efforts are doubled, and it will get even faster. Also, the savings of energy are now intensified. And the good news for us is we have 90% of our stocks are now filled with gas. This has not even been reached last year when there was no problem. But so everybody is confident that we get over the winter without problems. And then we have a whole year to prepare for the next winter. So we do hope that we will not be affected too strongly.
Mr. Ambassador, you mentioned a little bit earlier that the war in Ukraine has actually brought about solidarity within Europe. I do wonder whether because the tensions have been prolonged or much longer than what was initially expected by many security analysts, do you think there has been growing pressure on Germany to do more, to pressure both coming from domestically and from its allies?
You always have pressure in politics on one side and on the other. And in Germany, we had a discussion whether we should supply Ukraine with weapons, also with heavy weapons. We have a strong pacifist movement in Germany, and we had one for the last decades. But many people saw that you cannot remain neutral when you have such a war. And if you do not do anything, then people will suffer, they will die, and you have to supply with Ukraine with weapons. And I think many people have understood that and are now also supporting the government in its efforts to support Ukraine. But of course, there is a minority of people who is still critical. Other people say it's not enough what we do. But then we also need to see that we went into this situation rather unprepared. In Europe, we had the feeling that we finally overcame war as a means of politics. And for 70 years, we enjoyed peace, and we could not imagine that someone would come up and go back to the policies of the 19th century, to imperialism and colonialism, that someone would try out to wipe out another country. Let's not forget, it is a permanent member of the Security Council, especially charged with the preservation of peace, who is doing that. That is unprecedented. And I think if you take into account that nobody was prepared for this, we are coping with it quite well.
Well, that's interesting, because if there weren't warning signs that Russia would invade Ukraine, what warning signs then do you see from the reemergence of war from in Europe? I mean, how can Europe be better prepared for an eventual, or for a situation like the one that you're facing now with the war in Ukraine?
Well, the only situation imaginable is there now. It is Russia who is the aggressor, and we all have acknowledged it, that there is such a regime in Moscow who is not hesitating to wage war. There are also fears that the war might spill over. We have done everything to make Russia understand that we do not want to go to war with Russia, and we have abstained from intervening into this war. However, we need to be prepared. In my country, our federal chancellor, he spoke of a change of times, and this meant for Germany that we establish a certain sum for our military. This is 100 billion euro to newly equip our armed forces. And that is one reaction. We also want to live up to the 2% of GDP spending on the military, which is a NATO commitment, a commitment of all NATO member states. And we do this, and others are also doing it. But we're doing it in a peaceful sense. That is to say, for defense. We do not want to be involved into this war, but we need to support Ukraine in fending off this aggression.
All right, we're going to take a quick break here on the show, but let's come back and continue this conversation in just a couple of minutes. Stay tuned to Consider This.
Voluntarily.
Hi, thanks so much for staying with me on Consider This. So let's continue our conversation with the Ambassador of Germany to Malaysia, His Excellency Dr. Peter Blomeyer. Your Excellency, you've been the German Ambassador to Malaysia, I think, since 2020, is that correct?
Right.
And yes, so I'm just wondering, what are the achievements, the substantial achievements that you have seen between our two countries in terms of bilateral relations? I mean, granted, much of your tenure here has been during a pandemic, but what is it that you have achieved and you're hoping to achieve while you're here?
Well, I think that Malaysia and Germany are bound by very cordial and friendly relations since the very day of existence of Malaysia, because Germany has recognized Malaysia on the 31st of August 1957, and just 1 month later, on 1st of October, we are celebrating that the day after tomorrow, on 1st of October, we opened our embassy. So we have the 65th anniversary of our diplomatic relations. And we have strong and long-standing relations with Malaysia. And first of all, I would like to say they are based on the economy. Malaysia is Germany's most important trading partner within ASEAN. And Germany is Malaysia's most important trading partner within the EU. Also, investments are going high. We have more than 700 companies operating in Malaysia, German companies. So I think in this field, this is a strong backbone of our relations. Now, we had the pandemic, as you rightly mentioned, and we think that we should also now emphasize the cooperation in the field of health. We have a few companies here German companies operating in Malaysia, but we should also promote the relations, for instance, between the ministries of health, and there are now the first steps being taken to establish these relations. Another very important field which we want to stress is the environment. I think that both our countries, we are affected by the environmental crisis, by the climate crisis, and we are hit by severe floods, change of weather patterns, erosion, sometimes droughts, at least in Germany, by the flood of plastic, by the loss of biodiversity. So there are very many issues in this field which could be tackled jointly. And as I told you, we have now a green government, a partially green government in Germany, and the competence for what we say foreign climate policy is with the Foreign Office. So it is part of my job description also to work on this field. And we have quite a few projects going on with Malaysia on this field, and we want to intensify this. Then we have culture. Culture is a very important element, and also education and science. As we want to promote the German language. We have the Goethe Institute, for instance, here in Malaysia, with many classes for Malaysians. We have 1,600 Malaysian students in Germany. I can only recommend to your listeners here to learn German, to the young people, because we have a decisive advantage in Germany, because if you speak German well, then you can enlist in a normal German university without fees. It's of course you have to come up for your cost of living, but even if you don't have a scholarship, you can study in Germany for free. So it is worthwhile learning German. Yes, and these are just a few fields.
That's quite remarkable. I think an interesting proposition for many, especially having higher education being free. Can I pull on some of those threads that you mentioned? You talked about health, environment, culture, and education. I'm quite curious about the environment. As you said, the climate crisis affects us all. It knows no borders, but there seems to be, if I may say so, a lack of urgency in implementing policies to mitigate some of the impacts of the climate crisis. Germany, undoubtedly a leader in terms of environmental issues. Where do you see Malaysia and Germany working together? Where do you see the synergies in that relationship? What can Malaysia do better in this regard?
Well, I think what we both need to do now is that we implement our commitments to the Paris Agreement. We agreed to reduce substantially our greenhouse gas emissions. And Germany, for instance, committed to reducing them compared to 1990 by 65% in 2030, and all of it by 2045, that we will be carbon free by 45. And Malaysia did the same. Malaysia said that they want to be carbon free by 2050. But we need to define the steps how to get there, and I think you are right. And this is urgent that we do this. In Germany, the government has tried to formulate a few goals, but it went to our constitutional court, and the constitutional court said this is not good enough to implement the Paris goals, and obliged the government to work out another program. And the reason behind it was that the Constitutional Court said this is a fundamental right of the young generation. That was very interesting for us Germans to hear, that it's a fundamental right of the young generation to inherit a planet still worth living on. So the government had to come up with a new program. And this program is that each sector has to define its own contributions to climate gas reductions. That is to say, energy and industry, construction, traffic, of course, agriculture, even private households. So this is how we try to do it now. Some sectors try to sneak out and find excuses, and we have to deal with that now. But overall, we are committed to that. It is very difficult now because of what we discussed before, the war against Ukraine, the impact on our gas supply, but we are still committed to it, and we will find a way to realize it. As for Malaysia, I think it is also necessary to define steps, but that's of course up to the Malaysian government how to do it. I think it is a very good step that they said, for instance, there will be no new coal-fired power plants in Malaysia, and the goal is very clear. 2050, Malaysia will be carbon-free. So I think both countries are working on it, and of course it is necessary to exchange experiences. As I said, we have 700 German companies here. We will have an exhibition of these companies next Tuesday when we celebrate our National Day. And it is an exhibition actually on the environment. All companies will feature what they are doing in Malaysia to reduce the impact of climate change and to help to deal with the environmental crisis. So I think if you only look at the economy and everything will depend on new product design, production, construction, and so on, then there is ample space for cooperation between Malaysia and Germany. But also, of course, GIZ is active here, the embassy is active here, and this will be a priority of our cooperation.
Well, I'm heartened to hear that there are over 700 German companies here operating here in Malaysia, and that we are the most important trade partner with Germany in ASEAN, vice versa, Malaysia, the EU. Can I ask you then, what will it take to take it to the next level? It's been said that German companies are quite conservative investors, that they usually look for economic stability, they look for the right infrastructure, transparent governance. Is Malaysia the right combination of factors? Are we doing enough to promote ourselves as an investment destination? And I ask this, as our neighbors are giving us a run for our money.
Yeah. Well, I think you are doing quite well, very well, I even would say, because now, indeed, the German companies are looking for new investment destinations. Those companies which are not here yet, we have many here, but we also have some which are not present in Malaysia. And you know that with the power play between the US and China, and with the war in Ukraine, the call for diversification has grown stronger, and this also means regional diversification. So companies active in China looking now for a second leg in the region, and there Malaysia is a very good place because you have a very good investment climate. The government, irrespective of what government, is friendly to foreign investment. You have a workforce which commands the English language, different from the workforce of your surrounding countries. You have a good infrastructure. You have an excellent and strategic position within the region. So there are many many factors which attract German companies to come here. They have to cope with some difficulties, of course. There is some red tape and corruption is an issue. But even there, your legal system showed that it can cope with corruption, as we could see in a few recent cases, and that contributes to a good reputation of Malaysia. So all in all, I think, and then you have, of course, you have RCEP, and CPTPP is coming. So this is also attractive for German companies to have their own company founded here. Many companies have done that and operate from Malaysia. Malaysia is also an excellent regional hub. So I think all in all, it is still is and continues to be a good investment destination.
Mr. Ambassador, it's been a pleasure speaking with you today. That was my conversation with His Excellency Dr. Peter Blomeyer, the Ambassador of Germany to Malaysia. And that wraps up this episode of Consider This. I'm Melissa Idris, signing off for the evening. Thank you so much for watching and good night.